Welcome to episode 23 of the Truth and Legend podcast.
It's February 4th as we're recording here.
Yeah, when did we record the last one?
Oh gosh, it's not good. We said we were going to do every 2 weeks, and I want to say it was in December, or maybe it was beginning of January.
It was December. No, it was definitely December because I was gone all of January.
Oh yeah, because then, everyone, over Christmas, I got shingles. Shingles is not something that happens if you're like, it doesn't just 50 years old, there's shingles. Nope, it can happen to you if you're under 50. So
significantly under 50.
Oh geez, it was painful. I didn't appreciate, because when you hear shingles, everyone always talks about it in reference to like chickenpox. Like, oh, if you had chickenpox when you were little, you're at risk of shingles. And you're like, yeah, chickenpox wasn't that bad, right? You just remember like your mom rubbing that what's that lotion that they used to put on? Yeah, that pink stuff. And
Pepto-Bismol.
No. I don't know what it's called. And so that's like all I remembered. But shingles actually develops around the nerves, and can be nerve pain as well. And so where I got it, it went from like my sternum to the middle of my back on my left side. And the way it started is I thought it was a rib that was out of place. And so I went to a chiropractor, and he's like, oh yeah, that's what it sounds like. And so we were like working on it. Christmas happened, and I started developing blisters, and it was one of those moments like, oh my gosh, something else is wrong. And turns out it was shingles. So yeah. And if you don't catch it within the first 3 days, you can't go on the antivirals, or they're sufficiently less like efficient in helping. So luckily I was within that time period and I was able to get on that, but it still took, I think I was down for like 25 days. Brutal.
Yeah, it was that whole wake up call for me to go and get a shingles shot. And I would plan on doing my annual blood work and everything I do every year anyway. So I was like, and I had been told, with all these things nowadays with the COVID and blah, 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 or the flu shot. I never get the flu shot just because I feel like I get the flu when I get the flu shot. It's probably not. Everybody tells me that can happen, but I guarantee you I get it, and it's coincidence or whatever. I just don't do it anymore. So I was trying to get it a couple of years ago, and I think I was driving up to Alaska, and the woman was like, just be prepared to be down for a couple of days. She's like, you're not going to be down and out, but you're just not going to feel great for a couple of days after the shingle shot. So I put it off. Then the next year I put it off. I'm like, no, I don't have time to be down for a couple of days. But then this year I'm like, with you having it and talking to you, I'm like, I don't care if I'm down for a couple of days, because this does not. I mean, you are one of the most positive people I know, and you were like hurting.
Yeah, there was a moment we got back from my mom's house, because it's not contagious unless they're like someone that hasn't been vaccinated for chickenpox or hasn't had the chickenpox. Unless they're like touching the blisters and like the fluid inside of it, it's not really spreadable. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't have the blisters even when we were up at my mom's for Christmas. And so I just came back to the house and I was like, what is wrong with me? And I remember going and like laying face down in the pillow and just like moaning in pain, and then passing out at some point, and Kristen like waking me up like, are you okay? So yeah, it was a different type of, it just wouldn't go away no matter what you did.
Well, I've known a couple other people that have had it, and yeah, it's not fun. And you can muddle your way through it, but it is, even walking with clothes touching it is not good. And it's probably gross. So just to finish my thought on the shot, I didn't feel it. My arm got really sore. It was like somebody like punched me with a sledgehammer for like a week. It was sore. But as far as like feeling down and out for a couple of days, I didn't have that at all. So now I was just going to say, it's 2 shots. So it's 2 months apart. So I've got to wait till whenever, March or something, and then go in and get my second one. So yeah, that's no good. And I don't think you build up Like if you've had it once, I think you can get it again. I don't think it's one of those things where it's just like, oh, well, now you've got it and now you're safe. But I don't know.
Yeah, and like the doctor, she said that it can coincide with several things. Like they see it sometimes when there's cancer present. They see it when there's been a lot of sickness or autoimmune disease issues. And mine was definitely triggered by stress. Bought myself a new truck with everything going on. Our other truck did not fare well, being run through the desert and idling in desert temps and everything that I put it through last year. So it was time for a new truck. So putting that as a business investment is really stressful. There was like 3 projects up in the air. Poor Kristen and Dean had been sick for like a month with that junk that was going around. So I mean, it was just a lot going on, and I think that stress finally just ate on me, and it was game over. And my body's like, "Nope, enough's enough. We're gonna give you shingles. Here you go."
Well, let's talk a little bit about your new little truck. That is a pretty cool. I mean, you didn't go out and buy a brand new one, which is great because you just didn't, eat that $25,000 right off the top for driving it off the lot. But um, I've actually ridden in it. We went to the airport because I was in Denver, and that is about it. I mean, it was cold that morning. I don't know. It was like one of those mornings in Denver where it was minus something, and we didn't spend any time outside, and we just drove to the airport. But it was super nice to roomy. Like you could get a lot of stuff done in it, and I don't know. Give me the particulars on it because it came with like an aluminum.
Yeah,
I don't know what it's
like
called,
a topper.
but it's more than a topper because it doesn't have a tent on it.
Well, so the backstory of this is there was a gentleman. He worked for a magazine that I don't know if I can. I don't know if he wants me to say it. So anyway, there was a gentleman that built it with cooperation from some of these companies, and they're really good companies that had worked with it. So there's an American Expedition Vehicles lift on it. It's on a Dodge Ram, and it's just the tradesman level. So it's the very base level, which is exactly what I like because it has mechanical dials and none of the fancy touchscreen stuff. It's all tactile, right? And it's the base version, but it has the big Cummins in it that I wanted because we do tow things. And then because he had worked with these companies, he was able to get a lot of these things um, built to his specifications, and so it's a very specific build where he put this topper on it, and it actually has a canopy camper in the top of it, but it acts as a hard top for the camper shell portion. It's made out of aluminum, so it can be locked. I don't have to worry about valuables getting taken from back there with like glass windows or anything like that. And then the lift helps me just because I tend to find myself in positions that maybe I shouldn't be in a truck. The last shoot that I was in with that industrial one, everyone was getting stuck because there was like 8 inches of mud. And so there was just a bulldozer going back and forth, pulling out trucks. That was the entire job of that one. And so we find ourselves in those positions often. And then it just has like little lights and stuff that he's built out. It has a central control system for everything. All the lighting systems, the radio systems, everything that's a secondary system that was added after it is all wired into that. So you don't have to worry about like splicing into the vehicle system. It was just done right. And he wanted out and I wanted a new truck and we made it work. So it was just good timing, honestly.
Yeah, it was
And
perfect.
money. I mean, there's that portion. But
Well, and it wasn't terribly expensive for what you got. I didn't think. I mean, I think it was fair.
yeah. Yeah. And if you start looking at brand new trucks, it's insane what they're charging for the at dealers. So I wasn't about to buy a brand new one. I wanted a used one. So yeah, it has 40,000 miles on it. So a lot left on the Cummins motor. We'll see how the body fares. I still have some things that I want to do to it. So maybe I'll film some of that and we can just overlay it as it happens. But for the most part, it's ready to go. I need to get back out there and test it and like go find the horses, I guess.
The good thing too is it probably has a scratch or two on it, right? Which then it's a lot easier. to take it out and get that first scratch. Your first scratch is not that big of a deal. So
Oh man, speaking of scratches, I met a guy, and every time he would take delivery of a new vehicle, he would take his key out and he would scratch the car because it would get it out of the way. And it was like a thing of honor for him. But I don't know. And they were expensive. Like the one that I saw him do this on was like a 911, so it's not like it's a cheap car. So, but it was a big deal for him before it even like hit the pavement where he would take delivery, scratch it.
there's something to be said for that because I rebuilt that Forerunner and I still won't take it. If there's any chance at all of the road being really skinny with branches and stuff, I'm just not going to go. I paid all this money for this really nice paint job, which was dumb, dumb. I wish I wouldn't have done it. I should have just put a wrap on it. And that way, if it gets scratched, you just peel it off and put a new one on and just don't worry about it. And I guess I could still do that. But I think the cost of a wrap is going to be as much as I paid for that paint job.
Yeah, I think last time I checked into it, it was like $4,000 for a vehicle, but that size, not like a really big truck, but yeah, a truck like that Forerunner.
The thing is I think I'd only have to do the hood and then the sides. And that's not a lot of real estate. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those old Forerunners. So anyway, all right. So that's cool that you got that, and I think the stress of adding that expense does lead to stress overall, which probably led a little bit to the shingles. But
Yeah.
get it all out of the way while it's not like you're missing shoots or anything.
No, no, it was good timing for it. Well, speaking of shoots, you had a fun adventure while that was all going on for me. You were up north, right?
I got the weirdest call in December, and it's a typical 100% typical like film shoot phone call where somebody calls and said, "Hey, in 2 days or 3 days or whatever it was, we're going to drive back up to Prudhoe Bay in the middle of December because there's this car shoot. Wildlife work has been really slow. So my buddy who has the equipment that was required to do this shoot, it's been slow for him too. He's like, let's go do this." So it was supposed to be, so we were going to use a gimbal on a helicopter.
Mm-hmm.
So at first he just wanted me to be in a chase truck in case the helicopter had to land or if they had a part that he has a couple of gimbals. So I thought, well, or he thought he could just have an extra for parts if there were problems. Because here's the deal. I don't think there was a lot of thought as to timing in the Arctic for this shoot from this company that we were working with. But I also think they were up against a deadline. So I think they were trying to get content out by January. So they didn't really have a lot of choice. But what I'm referring to is December 21st is the shortest, it's the winter solstice, right?
Right.
So the shortest amount of daylight. Well, if you're driving to the Arctic, the sun doesn't even come up over the horizon. It gets light, but it's twilight. It's like, what do they call it?
It's that blue hour, right?
Yeah, but what is it for drones? Civil twilight.
Civil twilight, yeah.
It's like civil twilight for maybe 3 or 4 hours. So we didn't have a lot of, that was the other thing too, is they originally wanted to do this on a helicopter, but then they would have been flying out of Fairbanks and going up to Prudhoe Bay. I don't know the number of miles, but I'm thinking that helicopter is not going to get very far if they're going to be based out of Fairbanks. And that time of year, you can have temperatures that range anywhere from minus 50 to plus 20. You just don't know. And that helicopter, if there's freezing fog or whatever, it could be a problem. So it oscillated between helicopter, no helicopter, car, no car, long lens just on the side of the road. Just try to figure out and we didn't know exactly what this company wanted. We just knew that they wanted to have this aerial type footage. Well, where we landed was my buddy has a Sprinter van too. And we mounted that gimbal to the top of the Sprinter van. and it ended up working really. It was by far and away the best way we could have done the whole shoot. We didn't have to worry about the dangers of having a helicopter. We were able to travel with this caravan of cars that was traveling from Fairbanks to Prudhoe or Dead Horse, and that in this caravan we were able to be in front of it and shoot behind. We would be able to be in back of it, shoot forward. We could be in the middle of it, and we could shoot both directions. It ended up being really cool.
So we mounted a gimbal up on top like a GSS.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so he had a big arm that he paid way too much for because he bought it a long time ago, but it was one of those, it just takes out the up and down motion.
Yep.
And it's amazing. I mean, that haul road is pretty good. I mean, they maintain it really well just because there's so many trucks going up and down it. But it's gravel and it's, you know, you're going to have your share of potholes. And man, you could just drive. I could go 40, 50, 60 miles an hour. Never really 60, 40 and 50 consistently. And you watch the screen and there's nothing. So the gimbal's taking out all those micro things. Yep. And then this arm is taking out a lot of the bounce. You would never, ever know, I think, if you looked at this footage, that it was shot from a moving vehicle. It was amazing. And we were going to use a 50 to 1000 Canon lens, but he was really wanting to get wide shots too. And then I think what we ended up using was a 25 to 250. I don't know, something in that range. I don't remember the exact. It was a Canon piece of glass that was one of their cinema lenses, and super cool. And we had the 1.4 built in, so we could have the 1.4, so we could multiply for tighter shots. But when you're shooting a line of cars that was 6 to 8, you know, you didn't need a extreme telephoto. And if we wanted to get close-ups of any of the cars, we had radio communication, so we could have a car move to the front of the pack. Or whatever we needed to do. So it was kind of cool. And the biggest thing they were trying to do is show that these cars are good in cold temperatures. And this year in Alaska has been really weird. I mean, there's been, up until a couple of weeks ago, there has been hardly any snow. It started out great. There was a good couple of dumps in like October, November. And then it started raining. So it's been raining all the way through January. It was just raining. When up until a couple weeks ago, everything was still brown. It was just no snow, just brown. Temperatures were in the 30s. It was warmer. I was in Colorado for a lot of January. It was warmer in Alaska than it was in Colorado. So it's just been weird. So we didn't get those extreme temperatures. One night when we arrived in Dead Horse, it was like minus 25. But for the most part, it was always above zero. So while they still got a good test, it wasn't like the test that you would really want to put a car through if you were driving through minus 40. But at minus 42, we were really worried about that gimbal up on top. You know, it'll still work, and it's supposed to work. But you never know. I mean, when you're flying in a helicopter, which we did a couple of years ago when we were flying in the Brooks Range in the winter, it was definitely that cold. But the higher you go, the temperature inversions, it gets a little warmer, so that it's a little bit better at elevation. But it was cool to drive. I've never driven. So what's funny is all these shoots I've done in the Arctic over the last couple of years, I've never driven that whole road. So that was a chance for me to drive the road too, right? Because I had driven from Fairbanks to Coldfoot for one shoot. And then I was on another shoot in the summertime where I had driven from a place called Happy Valley, which is a place up on the Brooks, past the Brooks Range. And I've driven from there back to Dead Horse. But I missed that whole center part, which is the coolest part of the whole road, which is driving through the Brooks Range. So you get this Adigan Pass and you get all this cool stuff. And I'd never been on it in the last however many years. And I knew I'd get there eventually, but I kind of thought maybe I'd do it in my own van or something like that at some point. But this
not in the middle of winter.
Opportunity to do it and get paid for it. Yeah, not in the middle. But now after doing that in the middle of winter, I would definitely do it in the van if you had those conditions. But it's so hard to predict. I mean, like I said, there was only one night that was cold, and the rest of the time it was always above zero. It wasn't like it was warm. I mean, you got out. The funniest thing about the whole thing for me was I was just driving the van, right? I didn't, and I was there to help him out with technical stuff. But when you're running a gimbal, you just have one operator,
Right.
and then the van has to go where it needs to go. But you need to have somebody that knows filming to drive the van, because you need to be able to put them in the right position of, or just work together to get it done right. And so from start, when we left Fairbanks all the way to getting back, I never had anything on but Crocs, which is too funny because I had my big snow boots there, but I'm like, well, I don't want to drive in those. I mean, my feet are just going to be all sweaty, right? So I thought,
Right.
okay, I'll just have them right here on the side, and if and when I need to get out, which we had ambitions of doing, like get ahead of the caravan and then
Right.
shoot with the long lens, and then I would have to stand outside for whatever, an hour. So I just had them on the ready. But as it turned out, these guys were not stopping. Part of their test was they didn't want to dilly dally. So there was absolutely no time for us to drive ahead. And they were keeping a pretty consistent speed. So they weren't deviating. It was a true test of cars. And I don't want to say who we were doing it for because I don't know if we can.
Right.
So anyway, it was cool. It was fun to do. And I would love to do more of that, actually. I would like to get the word out some way and market it somehow, because I think there's probably a lot of companies that test cars in that kind of environment, especially now with electric cars. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people wanting to test how cold these batteries perform. I was talking to somebody at Dead Horse because we got a flat tire, and I was trying to mitigate that. And I talked to somebody who said that Audi used to keep cars up there for testing. They had a big warehouse where they kept a bunch of Audi vehicles, or flew them in or brought them in, for the season of testing. But they don't do it anymore. So who knows? It would be fun to do. I mean, and then you look at all the wildlife possibilities, because when we shoot with the gimbal, we're usually thinking a boat or a plane.
Right.
But man, after doing that, now of course you're stuck on a road. So I think you could do some cool stuff I know they do cool stuff in Yellowstone with gimbals on cars or snow coaches or whatever. I think you could do some cool stuff in Denali. You could probably do some cool stuff on the road going down to Seward and Homer, but you're totally, whatever you're shooting has to be close.
You're
to the
stuck
road.
to a vehicle. Yeah. Huh.
So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So did you have any issues with like icing on the front element of the gimbal at all?
We did a couple of times, and it was just a temperature inversion, like going over Adigan Pass.
Right.
It would fog up, or not fog up. It would ice up on the exterior. And we were thinking, if we're going to do this a lot more, we would have to either, like when you go out and do Star Trails or you go out and do Aurora.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen people where they put hot
rubber band, some hot hands to it.
Exactly. And I'm thinking, well, maybe we could do that. If you got them all warm in your pockets, and then you had maybe stick Velcro and then put it, because it's got a big snoot on the end of it to protect the lens, because you're driving. I mean, who knows, with rocks and dust and frozen crap. So I was thinking, well, maybe we could just line the inside of that with hot whatever. That might mitigate. I don't know if it would or not. It would be cool to try out. But yeah, we did have a couple of problems. And the guy running the camera would be like, man, I don't know, this camera's not focusing. And then we're both like, I bet it's ice fog or ice building up. And sure enough. So we'd have to crawl up there, pull it off. I would just put it inside and on the defroster to try to get it off, because you didn't want to wipe it too much. Right. And you didn't want to scrape it off. But then you're heating it up, so then you're putting it back out in the cold. It was like this little kind of thing we had to play.
Well, because the inside of the gimbal stays pretty warm because of the camera, right?
Yeah, it can, right? If you start out, and you want to start it up and let it run inside that, especially at cold temperatures. Yeah. Because you do have the inverse problem too if it's too warm.
Right.
Because if you're doing the desert stuff, like say you're shooting the Baja or whatever from a helicopter, it could potentially get too warm in there. But the cool thing about a helicopter is you can find a temperature in the air that is not what it is on the ground.
Right. There's air going by it. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think you'd get it figured out. I mean, we ended up with so much cool. I would love to see. They were supposed to come out with stuff by the end of January, and I haven't seen any. I don't know if we'll ever. They weren't. They weren't an American car company, so
Right. We
all
may
the
never see
crew.
it.
Exactly. I don't even know the whole crew. There was only like 3 people that spoke English, so it
Oh,
was just
geez.
a lot of like, who knows if it'll ever come out. But
Okay.
the cars were super cool. I was impressed by the cars.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. So that was a fun one. I would, like I say, I would definitely do that again. And it would be great if you could get in that line of work where people just knew, hey, all this stuff exists in Alaska.
Hmm.
And if you want to test some stuff, we could dial it in pretty quickly.
Right.
But
That's
I would
cool.
do it like and it's all the timing for these car companies too. So
Right.
if you're working on 2025 cars, you want to shoot it in 2024, and you probably want to
Mhm.
shoot it late 2024 so you have the most current new car possible.
Yep.
So December would be probably the best, but it's the least amount of light. So we did a lot of driving at night or in the dark. It wasn't at night necessarily, but in the dark.
That's funny. So was Dead Horse dead right now, or was it just full of workers?
Oh, in the winter's the busy time up there because that's when they can go and they
Right.
do a lot of exploration and they do a lot of. You wouldn't believe if you go up there, you just see these snowcats, hundreds
Mhm.
of, and they're not snowcats. They're like industrial sized tracked vehicles that are pulling these mega trains of who knows what supplies. And I think they do a lot of like, or maybe not so much anymore, but they used to do a lot of seismic stuff,
Mm.
where they would thump the ground and
Yep. Yep.
figure out. You know a lot more about that than I do.
Yep. That's cool though.
But yeah, it's super busy. I mean, we pulled up to the hotel the first night. Well, we had 2 hotels. The crew that we were shooting for, they were staying in one hotel. And then we went and stayed at the hotel that we normally stay at up there.
Hmm.
And when we dropped them off at the hotel that they were at, I couldn't find a parking place. And every parking place in Dead Horse has a plug-in. So all the parking lots have, and these aren't like mall style parking lots. These are basically just gravel, like
Right.
open gravel areas. But the only thing that designates a car spot is there's a plug-in at every one of them. So there's usually these huge trusses that hold up power. So there's a drop at every parking spot. And when we got there, every one of those was full. And then
Oh
there were
man.
about, I don't even know, I should have counted them, 10 or 20 trucks just sitting out there running with nobody in them. So I think what they were doing is they just let those trucks run all night
Right.
because
They
it
don't want them
was like
freezing,
minus
right?
25. Yeah. So if you can't plug in, I guess your solution is you just let it run. And maybe those trucks are set up like my van. If I let it run, that DPF filter is going to fill up
Hmm.
within 30
Yeah.
minutes. And then
Yeah.
you
You
go
don't want
into,
to idle a diesel.
no, but growing up, that was the thing. You would always see a big diesel semi or whatever. They just never shut them off, right? Because they just
Right.
go. But then the modern ones, you don't do that. In fact, I have that problem right now with my van because I was trying to work on it the other day, pulling the batteries out because it's been at that point it was cold and I didn't
Hmm.
want these batteries to die.
Oh,
And now my DPF filter's full.
because you let it idle.
Yeah, so then it goes into limp mode. So now I don't even know what I gotta do. This spring I'll figure it out. I think
Yeah.
what I can do is wait till the temperature warm up and then take it on an hour long drive and I think it'll burn it
Blow it
out
out. Yeah.
itself, but I'm not sure.
Man, that's pretty cool though. So then, Dead Horse. I mean, that's the end of the road, right? You can jump on a bus to get to the ocean, the Arctic Ocean, but
Mm,
that's as far as you can drive.
yeah. Yeah, you don't
Yeah.
actually get to the ocean. That was the other thing is this company had these crews had these grandiose ideas of flying a drone with all these cars parked right next to the Arctic Ocean.
Yeah.
Well, for one, the Arctic Ocean is frozen, so you don't even most people aren't even going to know that it's the ocean. It just looks like white,
You're right.
but you don't even get to see it. I mean, you're not even close enough in Dead Horse to see it. So I don't think they ever got the shot. And Dead Horse is not pretty. It's just a
Right.
lot of buildings. So and it's white. So yeah. And I don't know. I've heard that you can jump on a bus and do it like a, but Dead Horse is the public area where anybody could drive to. But
Hmm.
if you're going to go actually to Prudhoe, you it's
Yeah,
all
you can't drive that,
you
right?
can't do that. No.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's all um, there's a little security gate and all kinds of stuff that you can't go through. I'm sure if you worked at it and you had some sort of shoot that required you to be there, I think you could do it because you could work that all out ahead of schedule. But yeah, the average
Yeah,
person,
it's gonna be
as far
tough.
as you're
Yeah,
going to go, is Dead Horse,
yeah. Huh.
which is fine. I mean,
Were
I've
there
never
other travelers on the Dalton, or was it just you
lots of
guys?
trucks.
Okay,
It's all trucks. It's all
work
oil and
trucks.
gas. Yeah,
Okay.
all
Okay.
the one thing that I was always worried about, and I wish we had a CB because I would have loved to have listened to these truckers because I'm sure they were like, oh God, here's this group of cars again, passing us. Or those trucks are hauling too. They don't, most of the time, you are not passing them, they are passing you. And
Really?
then you're constantly worried about broken windshields because they don't, there's, those guys drive that road so much that they
They're
know
just
where they can
boogieing.
go. Even on slick roads, they know it's going to be straight for 2 miles or whatever. They're going. They're not. They're not
That's
dilly
cool.
dallying at all.
Right. Right. Wow.
Yeah, so you learn a lot. It would be fun. It would be fun to do a winter trip. I don't know what you would see for wildlife. We saw a lynx. We
Okay.
saw there was something else cool that we saw.
Wolverine.
No, unfortunately, I was on the lookout, but again,
I
we're
bet you
driving so
were.
fast. I'm like, and then it was so dark for so much of the time.
Right.
Um, but we did see a lynx, and that was at night or in the dark, and it was just
Yeah.
going down the road. Is the only reason I saw it.
Okay.
And then I did see some caribou. The place where the muskox are generally located, we drove through in the dark, both
Yeah.
coming and going, so I didn't see anything there. And we weren't stopping. I think if you stopped in some of those key places where you had a little bit of light and some binoculars, you probably would have seen some stuff,
Okay.
but we didn't. But it'd definitely be worth a little. Like in your truck would be a
Yeah.
blast. That
Oh
new
man.
truck of yours would be a blast.
Yeah. I'd love someday I'll get up there in a vehicle and not just fly up there.
Yeah, there's
But
so
it's like
much
a
to
week long
explore.
endeavor to get there.
That's if you're hauling.
Right.
Yeah, that's from Colorado, and if you're the fastest I've made it is 4 days, but that's in the spring when the days are long and you can drive 12, 14 hours a day. So it's basically from Colorado, from Denver to Anchorage is 52 hours, I think, of driving.
Yeah. That's a lot of driving.
Hmm. And there's some really cool stuff along the way. So if you're at all interested in cool stuff, whether it's wildlife or just the Canadian Rockies or the Yukon or whatever, there's just cool stuff. So if you want to stop at all, you figure it's going to take, I would 7 to 10 days would be the best. Well, I would
Yeah.
say, and then do that coming up, and then you want time in Alaska, so you need another 2 weeks at least, and then you're going to take that much time to go back home. So you're looking at a
A month?
6 to 8 week expedition to drive up here to spend any time.
Yeah.
So it would be fun. It would be a blast.
Yeah. That's wild though. That is pretty cool though. So you've gone to the farthest that you could go north in the winter
Hmm.
in a sprinter, in a 2-wheel drive sprinter, or was it 4-wheel drive?
It was just 2-wheel drive.
Love
Yeah,
it.
that was the other thing too. It's like, oh
Okay.
my gosh, what do we get ourselves into?
Right.
Because they could get a pretty good dump of snow, but like I said too, they maintain those roads so well. I mean, there's
Right.
like uh, Alaska Department of Transportation like facilities every so often, and then there's all those pump houses or pump
Hmm.
stations. So I think those guys probably do a certain amount of maintaining the road too, just because they got to check out those pump stations on
Right.
a regular basis. So,
Right.
um, yeah, I don't know. It would
Hmm.
be. I don't think I would do it by myself. Like I wouldn't do it as the only vehicle.
Right.
I would only want to do it if there was like two vehicles on the trip, and there's just that little safety net.
Yep. I
I
can
think that
appreciate
would
that
be the
after our
best way to
wild
do
horse
it.
incident.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we even decided that for that, right? Always have the second. Go ahead and drive 2 cars up there and at least have one close by. You don't need to,
Right.
drive everywhere in 2 cars, but
Yep.
for this you would want to.
Oh yeah.
But if you're
Yeah.
looking at content, it would be great because you would want to do content of the cars and content. I mean, driving over Adigan Pass was it
Oh,
was
I'm sure it was amazing.
and both times we drove over it was in the dark. And the guy I'm with is really knowledgeable about that road. So he's like he finally conned this company, this production company into we stayed in Coldfoot and we drove back to Adigan, which is not that far because it is so beautiful. And
Yeah.
he's like, you cannot do this whole road and drive it both ways in the dark and not take advantage of just the beauty of this
Right.
topography with a car commercial. Or no, it wasn't a commercial. It was like it was comparing cars, but just the beauty with cars traveling over this road was pretty dang cool.
Right.
So,
Huh. That's pretty
yeah,
wild.
yeah, yeah. It's fun to get to do stuff like that is not, not the wildlife stuff. In fact, I could do a whole year of that where you're just doing car stuff or industrial stuff or
Yeah.
anything that is not wildlife. I mean, it's more of just the filming and the challenges that you run up against, which is fun.
Yeah. Well, and it's different for every shoot. Like we just did that one in Akron, and there was, oh man, like there's just always something you have to overcome. Like this time, the Ready Rig, we were trying to use that Ready Rig with the Ronin, and I think it would have worked, but we just were in such tight quarters that I couldn't swing around with those arms sticking over. So I mean, there's just always something, and so you end up just pivoting and getting it figured out. But
Well, let's
it's
talk a little bit
every
about
shoot's
that
different.
because that was pretty cool. I mean, when we got
Yeah.
the call about that shoot, we got the typical, hey, let's just run one camera and then let's run a slider that is
Hmm.
constantly moving back. And then to me, I'm thinking, okay, that's cool 10 years ago,
Hmm.
but let's try to step it up. And then I immediately thought you just bought this Ronin 4D, right?
The 40. Yep.
And I'm thinking this is probably the shoot to use that. And it made for way more dynamic shots. A
Yeah.
lot harder to use just because you do have a lot of weight that you're trying to hold out in front of you. But we were able to mitigate that a little bit just because it wasn't like you were shooting for an hour straight.
Yeah, and it that camera still has its quirks though. Like if and I'm sure you noticed me doing it, but I know you were like trying to run that teleprompter, the main camera, direct these people. And so if I set that camera down, and I don't know what time I should do some testing here just to figure it out, but for the longest time I thought on battery swaps the shutter was changing because the grip would swap out batteries and we'd be ready to go, and I'd look down, do my little checklist, and the shutter would be 1/25, and I would have known that while we were filming at 1/50 just the last second. So I was like, all right, it has to be the battery, and maybe it's an intelligent battery, and these system settings are being written to the battery. Well, then we did a battery swap, and it didn't switch. So I was like, all right, well, maybe I'm just rolling the button, but there's no like dial. It's not like a mirrorless where there's a dial for the shutter. You actively have to like touch the screen for the shutter, change it to the setting you want, and then toggle out of that to confirm it. And so finally, there was a point where I'd set it down just to get weight off myself, and I picked it back up after a period of time and it had reset. And so I think it's just a time where it was going into a sleep mode or something was going on with it, and it would reset that shutter every time. And I know I messed up one clip for sure because of it, and where it was one of those where we just had to go, and I definitely messed it up. But um, that was like one of the weirdest things that was going on with that camera. Otherwise, it was great. But yeah, I kept resetting on the shutter side, and I still don't have an answer for it. So yeah,
But all in all, the other stuff, I mean, being able to go low and high, and then
oh, it was
you could
fantastic.
act like a slider if you wanted to.
Yep. And
And
then
then
because of the transmission system that's on the back of that camera, we didn't have to wire up a secondary system for a director's monitor. It was just built in, and we had that monitor over on the side. And that creative team, there was like 3 or 4 of them that could just sit around and watch both of those feeds, and no problem at all. So it was a really good piece of equipment for that shoot specifically.
I think it's gonna be good for so many shoots.
Yeah.
It's not one of those cameras where you just want to be the only person shooting.
Yes.
Because
Yeah,
you
you
do
don't
want to
want
have
it as.
another camera rolling just as your safety, which could just be a locked off shot.
Yep.
And then you want to have that creative stuff because it's just like you can't make a move go for a whole 3 minutes.
Right.
You can, but that needs to be planned out. This stuff was not planned. We were working with semi-professional talent that wasn't like spot on every time, and so you just needed that safety and that other cutaway shot that was your safety to cut out from
Mm-hmm.
a screw up on the talent's part, just so that we didn't have to have everything perfect every time.
Yep. Yep. Agreed. Yeah,
But
it
I
worked
would
out
say,
really well.
yeah, I think that camera is. I think every shoot we do, we'll use it.
I do too. Yeah, it was the only other and it's just like it's any piece of equipment, right? If we wanted to switch from we used a 50 millimeter for most of that, but if we did want a wide shot, it did take some time, and so we did lose some momentum there a few times when we were changing out lenses and we had to rebalance the gimbal and everything. But it's way faster than swapping out a lens on a camera on a gimbal, I think. But you still have the issues with the gimbal. You mentioned a slider. I actually saw a really cool gimbal or a really cool slider. You set up the slider system, and then it mounts the gimbal portion of a DJI, the Ronin RS system, the one where you hold them over, not the big one that you hold side by side. It mounts that system on top of the slider, and instead of having to use one of their proprietary systems where you have to then buy or like get their app and program it and all that stuff, it just uses the DJI system, and then it's as simple as you like point it where you want it, hit the button. This is the A mark. You move it, point it. This is the B mark, and it does it all for you. So they're coming a long ways with those systems, on those slider systems. But again, it's a 24-inch slider, so you get 24 inches of movement, and it'll repeat it as much as you want, but it's not very dynamic for a video that goes for 3 minutes.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And you could probably get a longer slider if you needed it in a different situation. That kind of stuff is awesome for wildlife if you have the time and the temperament of the whatever you're shooting, which 9 times out of 10 is just scenery. Because what are you going to have that's going to be tolerate? Like a bear is not going to tolerate. In fact, a bear is going to be way too curious and destroy your equipment, I would imagine.
Totally.
I could see doing like a fox den or something if it's accustomed to people or habituated. But then too, they're going to be curious too, so you're not going to really get much. The one thing that we had success on up here with the slider, and Eric did most of that work, was I just helped him, but he figured out the gimbal and we got it all going. But we have a salmon stream that at low tide, you still have salmon in the river. The only challenge we had there was the salmon are splashing so much you can't get the camera lens too close because it'll just cover your camera in water. So, but he ended up getting a bunch of really cool shots of salmon swimming upstream with the movement of the camera.
That's cool.
And then when I was shooting in Hallow Bay a couple of years ago, there was another team out there shooting, and this guy was running around, and I'm like, I don't understand how he's going to get all this, but he got it. And I saw the actual film, and it's freaking cool.
Because they were getting like the flowers and
grass. He was doing wildlife. So he was
really?
Yeah. There was 2 of them, and they were carrying this whole stuff, and he'd carry it set up. And then, we were in a place where there's lots of bears. And so you could kind of predict, I think this bear is going to come across this river, across the stream or whatever.
That's cool.
So, and then you could get on the ground level, and it was no fancy gimbal, like motorized or anything. It was just all hand. But I think he was running like a a DSLR of some sort with maybe a 70 to 200, and then he would just manually move the slider, and that turned out kind of cool.
Yeah, that's really
Not
cool.
kind of cool, really cool.
Yeah.
But it's just
Wow.
another thing, and then he had to dedicate a full, I don't know, 2 or 3 days to just because what are your chances of getting that shot to work?
Hmm.
Every time is zero because you're at the mercy of where are they going to cross or where are they going to be, and am I in the right spot or do I have something to reveal or whatever. So, but I think over the 2 or 3 days, he probably got enough shots that made the film
Yeah.
that much better.
Yeah. Yep. Huh. Going back to that shoot, I wanted to circle up because this was a big set, right? We had a lot of people on set, but we had an audio guy specifically, like that was his entire job. And when you talk to someone that does, like, he'd been doing this for a long time, I think it was like 15 or 20 years that he'd done it. He just had like every little thing. Like we were talking about batteries, remember that? And we are like, when are you going to switch over to the rechargeable AA's? And he's like, well, I don't want to switch to that because they have to have this little thing in there. And he had a name for it. I don't remember it. I'm already ruining it, right? Uh, but there's this little thing in the battery that has to convert it down to the amperage that the Sennheiser battery packs that he was using. To go into that Sennheiser, it needs to be a lower amperage. And so there's this little conversion system within the battery that it would do that, and it knows to do that. But it puts out a radio frequency and it would inhibit some of the range. And he's like, nope, I'm good with these. And I get these from IKEA, of all places, is where he liked the batteries from. And just like all those little details that he knew. And then there was like all these little secrets that he had worked on a set before. And there was a woman that would wear different dresses, and they had all these little DJI lavs, the little ones that we all use, right? And instead of just having this lav stick out there, they painted them all the colors of the dresses, and so they had red and blue and white and all these different colors. And it's just little things that you're like, oh, that's an easy way to just make that go away, right? And it was pretty cool. And he was top notch. Like the audio never even had an issue, so that was pretty cool.
Well, and you said he was using Sennheiser mics, and he was for a few things, but most of his mics were the Electrosonics, which are
Oh, okay.
like $3,000 mics.
Right.
Just the transmitter and the receiver,
Right.
and then now you got the actual microphone, which is probably $600.
Yeah, I guess I was only looking at the IFBs.
Yeah, those were Sennheisers, and
the creative team.
He knew that
they drop them.
Yeah, if you looked at them, they were all like beat. But I would be the same way. I'd much rather buy a $300 or $400 receiver, right, that that some set person is gonna like forget that they set it on a chair and they're gonna go walk it off and it smacks the ground.
It's gonna go smack. Yeah.
Whereas those Electrosonics are just like so nice, but you have to, unless you're working with somebody that wears them all the time and understands how valuable they are, and they're just as interested in keeping your stuff nice as you are, you don't want to use that expensive stuff.
Yep.
But it was super fun to talk to that guy because, like you said, he was very knowledgeable. He knew everything. He could mitigate any problem, any little solution. Like we got in a little discussion. Well, we were shooting some social media stuff, and they're like, well, just shoot it on your phone. And I'm thinking, well, the audio is going to be okay, but it's not going to be great. I do have my Pocket 3. Why don't we shoot it on that? And it'll shoot vertical. And then the grip that we had, he's like, oh, yeah, well, you can just use the mic with or I don't remember.
Well, because you can, on an Android, you can connect it as a Bluetooth system.
To your phone.
That's your phone. Right. But it doesn't work on the Apple platform.
It does if you don't
use the Blackmagic.
Right. You have to use a secondary camera app.
Yeah.
So I asked him, I was like, is there a way you could just put up a lapel microphone, a regular lav microphone for this thing, because we're going to shoot it on the Osmo, and then I can just use my little DJI mic. But do you have the DJI mic? Because I don't have one. I just have the little belt pack or whatever. And I handed it to him, and he's like, I don't think I do. He's like, but let me look. and he ended up hooking up a Sennheiser transmitter to the DJI. No, it was a Sennheiser receiver
Right.
to the DJI belt pack, and then put a Sennheiser microphone lapel mic
Right.
on our Talent, and it worked great. It
It
sounded
was
great. It worked
fantastic.
great. Yeah, but
Yep.
I wouldn't have thought of that. And now that I know that we could do that, that's like great because it'll just save. Because I always have a couple of Sennheisers with me, but now we don't use them much anymore because they're just bulky and cumbersome. And but the little DJIs are awesome,
Yep.
for size wise. But they look so dumb. I mean, more and more you watch stuff on YouTube, you just see them all the time. So I think it's going to become one of those things where people are just used to seeing it. But
Well, I don't know. Hollyland, which there's a lot of Hollyland stuff on sets. You see it mostly in like the headsets that they wear or video transmitters, right? And actually, that photography team that was there was actually using Hollylands for their digital sharing. But Hollyland just released this microphone, and I haven't used it, but I've just seen all the Instagram things that a new product is out, and so there's 15 videos about it. But it has a little itty bitty piece that comes over, so you clip it on like a shirt or a pocket or something, and the little piece that comes over is the microphone, and then they actually hide the receiver pack or the transmitter pack on the inside. So they are figuring out little ways to get around that. I'm sure DJI and Rode and all the other companies that produce those little things will catch on to that. But I did see that from Hollyland.
there's some cool stuff. I see a lot. I mean, they're more like the small rig of that industry,
Mm-hmm.
right? So,
Yeah.
and it's somewhat affordable. In fact, I was thinking about buying one for a monitor for the DSLR we were using because you had the monitor for the Ronin,
Yep.
and for like $400, you can get a transmitter receiver that'll transmit 1080, which is fine if all you're doing is a director monitor.
Right.
But I decided not to do it. We just ran a cable that was $40 or
Right.
$20. It
Right.
was just so much better. It was so much cheaper, but
Well, and we didn't
it
have
is
like a
limited.
video village where we had to like get transmissions back to, like, they were just right there with us. They
Right.
just needed to see a monitor. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Just fun stuff. I mean, I want to do more of those kinds of shoots, and it totally lends itself to the way we produce stuff. And that's, I guess, what I wanted to say about the audio guy. When they first called us about this shoot, I called you immediately because you have 17 different versions of wireless microphones,
Right.
from Rode to Zoom to DJI to, I think there's another one that you have
I
too.
have two of the DJIs. Yeah. But I
So
just have one in every bag, it seems like.
yeah, my thought was, okay, well, just Brandon's going to have enough variety that we bring 2 or 3 systems and we're going to find one that's perfect for what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But, and that's just how we operate. Keep the cost down, get the jobs, and go that way. But it's a whole nother thing to stress out about, make sure it's working and blah, blah, blah. And then in conversations with the producer from the shoot, she's like, oh, yeah, I've got an audio and grip on standby for the shoot. Do you want them? I'm like, heck
Yep.
yeah. Because then it's just one less thing for us to worry about.
Yeah, and the grip was great too. I mean, you tell him, "Hey, I need more light on this side," and he'd get it set up. And okay, you wanna move it? You need the grid. I mean, he was great too. So it's nice to have help that understands what you need and how to do it. And it was quick, right? So
The whole thing about all that, and I've been doing this for so long, and I still have not figured out pricing. Because
I
I'm
love
always
it.
like, we want the job. So let's go in half guerrilla mode, half like professional, we got this down. And then half is like, we can do everything. We got you. But you introduce the opportunity to have more problems if you're trying to manage audio and lighting and, with just 2
Right.
people that are still running cameras. And I just don't, I'm always like, okay, well, we can just go in and do the guerrilla mode. But the chances of getting a really awesome product are not that great. And they were
Right.
totally planning on spending that money. So I
Yep.
should have just put that into our bid. But it's like I say, I mean, it's just constantly trying to learn and how to price your stuff so that you get the work and the best product possible.
Right.
And it's going to be different, right? Because I know with some of the shoots that you've been doing, price is a huge factor. I think
Hmm.
price is a factor with every shoot you do, but
Yep.
depending on the size of the company you're working for, that bottom price goes up
Right.
depending on what you're doing. And so it's just a finesse balance thing. And uh, I just get frustrated with myself and trying to figure all that out and be
Me too.
consistent about it and give them a good enough price that they're not spending a fortune, but you're actually making money
Hmm.
so that we can survive. It's a dance. And if you get out of it, like we didn't do a lot of shoots the last part of last year, probably the last 6 months of last year.
Yeah,
And
not
I
like
just,
that. Yeah, that was a whole different. Like we've been doing, go out in the middle of a desert and film helicopters. That's a
right,
whole different world.
right. And you don't really worry about audio too much because it's
Hmm.
just nat sound, but it just staying on top of that kind of stuff. And it's hard to just look up on the internet and say, well, what should I charge for this? What's a fair rate? Because
Right.
there's nobody shares, and I get that too. I mean, you don't want to be like calling a competitor up and say, well, what would you charge for this?
Right.
And then I'm going to go, $50 cheaper or $500 cheaper or whatever.
Right.
It's just not going to work out that way. But it needs to happen more because I think the more we all work together on pricing, the more we're all going to be consistent, and you're going to consistently give prices that are reflective of what we're doing, but are also reflective of you being able to make some money as opposed to covering your costs.
Right. Right.
So I don't know how to mitigate that, but
Well, and it's hard because as a freelancer, your variable costs are changing. It's not like you're a the more you, the more you do, the cheaper that service gets, right? And the less you need to recover per job. And every year is different. So I think it's there's a formula that you can put together and you can apply that to, well, I need to cover X amount and there needs to be this margin from the top and my expenses are this much. But it's like the previous year is your guideline, right? But it's very much past performance is not indicative of future performance. And you just you struggle with that because you know your expenses; those are going to happen regardless of what you do. But the revenue, like the same job, is not going to come the same time every year. It's going to be a different job. It's going to be a different client, most likely. So I think that's where it gets the hardest.
yeah, and I work with some clients that, when we go out and do a job and they'll just come out right out and they'll say, here's our budget.
Right.
And I love those because I'm like, yeah, that's great. And it's always way more than I would have probably, not way more, but it's always more than what I would have probably estimated.
Hmm.
But they're probably more in line with where I should be. But I'm too scared to charge that because I'm too scared of losing the job and not getting the job because I'm
Right.
too high.
But then you're happy. They're happy because you're below that budget. You're happy because it's within your estimate. Like that's an easy word. Like versus that well, what's your budget? Well, what would you charge? And what's your budget? Well, it's an investment, and yeah, it's a dance.
Yeah. Well, and the whole
Um,
thing on that shoot is like you mentioned, we had stills, which were secondary, and we had
mhm,
video, and we were primary. Um, but I wish I'd have known going in because I would have bid on both because I would have
mhm.
wanted to do the stills and the video. But I'm actually glad that it turned out the way it did because it's too hard to focus on both. And we did shoot a lot of simultaneous stuff. So then at that point, you need to have
Yeah,
stills and video covered.
yeah,
So, but
yeah. And that
more and
was a bit of a
more,
dance because she used a lot of flash, and so we had to. I mean, you'll see that in video easily in most spots, and so we had to dance around. Okay, we're clear for 5 minutes. Go ahead and shoot. And so she'd shoot and get a bunch of pictures done, and then okay, we're ready to go. So then we'd start rolling, and it was a dance. But we got it all done, and we actually had some extra time, and so we could do those socials, which were really helpful for them.
Coming back from that, I'm excited to go out and do more. And then therein lies the next challenge, which is finding all the work that's out there.
Yep.
Because there's a ton of work out there. You just got to go find it.
Right. Yeah.
Which got me inspired to come back and work on our portfolio so that we can, have something to brag about, right? Or have something
Right.
to at least show to say, hey, this is the quality of work we're putting out. The one thing that I feel like we are lacking, and I don't know if this is a good conversation, but for somebody that's in our line of work that listens to this podcast, I mean, we all go through the same thing, is I feel like our stills portfolio is really strong.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like our video portfolio is not.
Yep.
But most of that is because the video, sometimes we don't even do the post. So you don't have
Right.
control of that. A lot of times it's stuff that is not for the public consumption. So a lot of our really great stuff you can't even show because it was more of an internal thing. And when you're working with a company that has 50,000 employees, the budgets are there and good enough to actually make money to do it, but it's strictly for internal. So we can't be showing that stuff off, which I like doing that kind of stuff, but you really can't show it off.
Right.
And then all the other stuff is
behind an NDA.
Yeah, it's just like, it's kind of frustrating. So you end up relying on personal projects.
Mm-hmm.
And
which I want to do more of. I have kind of stopped last year. I didn't do any personal projects, and I think that's really where you differentiate yourself is in those personal projects, and I need to do more of them. So that's what was one of my deficiencies last year that I'm trying to correct this year. So,
and if you listen to podcasts, I think you hear that a lot.
Yep.
Whether you're listening to the Visual Revolutionary or you're listening to any of the creative podcasts that I listen to, it's always very important to have that creative, personal work that becomes a calling card, and you can put it out and show it to whoever you want. So,
Yep.
I don't know. Do we want to talk about you are working on a personal project,
I have a
which is our
couple.
Moose Man documentary that we're
Yep.
working on together.
Yep.
I don't
And that's
think we
pretty
want
cool.
to talk too much about that one yet.
It's not ready yet.
We're trying
it's
some really cool stuff that
working,
is
yeah.
going to be kind of cool if it works, but I don't want to throw that out. Oh, you know what I do want to talk about just a little bit before we go? We're already an hour into this, so we can not talk too much longer. But
Okay.
AI, I feel like AI is very similar to when you went from film to digital, right? All the people that didn't make the jump right away were way behind the eight ball. And the ones that actually did switch were fine, and digital obviously was the way to go. And I do know some film guys that were just like, no, I'm not switching. And that was the end of their career. So now I feel like the AI is that way, right?
Yep.
But AI is so scary that it's like, do we get replaced 100%? I know Coca-Cola and somebody else,
Adidas. That
they
happened while we were
both
traveling.
did 2 commercials that were 100% AI. So I'm like, are we going to be gone? Are we going to be a thing of the past? Who knows?
Well, the Adidas one specifically, they used no agencies, no models. I mean, which for me has a whole nother question. Like, at what point in time are you not really showing your product in the real, like, it's all generated, right?
IRL.
But then on the same side, most people that watch TV, that watch car commercials, actually aren't seeing a car in real, like that's not the real car. So it's been going on for a while. And for those of you that don't know, what I'm referencing is most car commercials, they drive this one, it's a vehicle, and then they just CGI whatever the new vehicle is on there. So one day it's a Cadillac, the next day it's a Corvette, the following day it's a Land Rover. So they already have that system in place. But if you're like going to buy a shoe, right? Does is that a proper representation of that shoe? I don't know. Probably. It's good enough. Well, and actually Linkin Park, the music group, they just did a music video and they used AI for the video. And the way they did it is they used an iPhone, they scanned each person of the band, and then mapped that out. When there was a shot of a person, they would then use that scanned person as their um, AI self, I guess is what we'd call it. And then they would edit that AI self so that they could dissolve them, they could change them into a different being at different times. And it's really cool because then they scan the rooms as well, and the rooms are the same rooms, but then you see this feature and this dissolve effect on the individual band members, and it's really cool. But they still needed creatives to actually film everything. So I think that leads into where you're going with AI and the whole Kodak reference.
Yeah, I think you got to embrace it. I don't think you can say, oh, I'm not going to do that. So, my whole last couple of months, and you've been doing it a lot longer than I have, is okay, I just got to start playing. And when I'm on Instagram, I get a little ad that is like somebody saying, do yourself a favor and spend the next 30 days and work with AI and get proficient in some of them. And one thing I didn't understand, and I'm understanding more now, there are several, like there's an AI that's specific to a task.
Right.
And then, so the example that I'm referencing is I was trying to figure out, okay, I know so what started this whole thing is I know we have a client that is looking for something different. And so I'm like, okay, well, that's AI. That's something different for me.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully it'll be something different for them. So what can I do taking a still image that we shot, but then AIing it, or however you want to say it, applying AI to it that adds some razzle dazzle or to add something that we didn't accomplish in the picture, but that was mostly because of the setting or whatever. So then I started doing a little search, and what's funny is you use ChatGPT to do the search. So I'm like talking to ChatGPT. I'm like, what are the best AI agents? And it's what I think what you call them, right? The AI
Mm-hmm.
software is AI agent. What are the best ones to either add to or manipulate or work with an image? And then it gives like 3 or 4 of them, and then it says, "Oh, this is probably and you keep talking to ChatGPT, and you're like, well, I want to do this, or I'm thinking about this, or this is my idea." And this one kept coming up. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to try it because most of them have a trial. And so I put in a shot, and I was wanting a still image output, but I couldn't figure out how to get a still image output. But basically, what you do is you put in a shot. The AI agent analyzes that shot. So it's learning about that particular image based off of that, what's there.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a little chat box or a little input box, and you basically just talk to the AI and you say, okay, so we're going to start with this shot. And what I'm thinking about doing is adding this, maybe tweak the background or replace the background or do whatever. And then I want it to look like this. And I was just trying something really dumb, just something that was just exotic enough to definitely see a change. And it was just an experiment. And so I threw this image in. Should we even talk about it? I guess we could. So I threw in an image I used to shoot a lot of golf. So I had a picture of a woman that was kneeling down, kind of lining up a putt. And it was just a still image. And it was beautiful. And the background is just like nondescript. So I thought, well, that would be great to replace the background. So I put it in there. And so it's a green. You can't see the hole, but you can see the ball. You can see her holding the putter. And you can see her kind of crouched down, kind of trying to line up that putt, or at least thinking about the shot that she's going to have to make. So in the text part of it, or in the input part of it, I said, I want you to replace the background as though we were on some exotic island golf course with water and seaside cliffs in the background. That was just what I put in. And then I hit enter. And within 10 seconds, and now I'm thinking I'm going to get a still image out of this. Well, I don't know how to run the whole software quite yet. So I hit enter, and within 10 seconds, I have an image, and I showed it to you.
Mm-hmm.
The software went in and manipulated the woman so her head is moving, her hair is blowing in the wind, and then it's a reveal shot of the shot that I had that I started with, but then it kind of tilts up and then pans off a little bit, and it reveals this ocean with all these cliffs in the background. And it's not like awesome, but it's not bad. I mean, if you were doing a video and you needed to throw in something that was kind of exotic, as you're doing a commercial for some golf course on some, Hawaii or whatever, it would work for a 2 or 3 second shot just to throw in there real quick. And I'm like, holy moly. I mean, it's so real. Now, it's a free version. I didn't pay for it. And I don't even know how the pay structure works. I mean, I'm seeing more and more of these.
Another thing, yeah.
It works with tokens or credits, and you pay for something and you get but then I'm like, well, how many tokens does it take to do this? And
yeah, it's like an arcade.
Exactly. It's kind of weird. It's almost like crypto. Like you need to buy Bitcoin to pay for your tokens to do. I don't get it. And I didn't go any further. It allowed me to do one, and then I was out of credits. So I'm like, I don't think I want to play with this anymore, but until I actually figure out if it's going to work. So my thought is I want to talk to a couple of the creative directors I work with that are wanting to explore AI and just say, hey, look at what I did here. Am I on the right track of how you guys see AI being implemented into some of the stuff you're doing? Or do you even know about it? Because I think some of the creative directors I work with are probably not even have a clue. Some probably do, but most of them are so busy. I don't think they sit around at night after they're done with their job and play with AI.
Right.
So I don't know. I'm kind of struggling with how does it all work?
Right.
And how does it all incorporate into what we're doing? And how do we keep from replacing ourselves?
Oh, I don't think we keep from that. It's just timing. But I mean, we learned about AI, 2022? Is that when it really kind of took off? Feels like that's when they started announcing like video and photo, and it wasn't like the really terrible stuff before. And it actually had like I remember there was one with like puppy dogs, right? And that was like their big one, and you're like, oh, okay, like this is a real thing, like it's coming. I think that was 2022, but from there to where we are now, like all of a sudden you're like, holy cow, like this could actually work. They still can't get hands correct for some reason, I've noticed.
And I didn't mess around with that, and I do remember that, and it's like it's a weird digit kind of thing or something where they'll have two hands or too many fingers or whatever.
Yeah, and that still happens to me. But I've seen in like major YouTube videos now, I'm starting to see like that Mr. Ballin guy. I think we've talked about him before, just because he's done incredibly just telling stories on the internet. Well, on his video specifically, I'm starting to see all these AI generated scenes that he's adding in his B-roll. So it's definitely taking off. And that's stock video that would have been in the past, they would have had to go pay for. Now they're just generating it.
Right. So you're still paying somebody because you have to pay the AI agent, but you're not having to pay.
Now it's a prompt engineer.
Right. And it could be less. I'm hoping. I don't know. I find it interesting to talk about, and it'd be fun to talk to the audience with anybody that is actually using AI. And I'd really love to talk to somebody that is in our position that is using it successfully with clients to enhance what's being output.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I'm not scared. I think there's a lot of people that are scared that, oh my God, it's going to go away. I think you've got to embrace it. The one person that's doing it really well is that Tim Tatter. He's an
Mm-hmm.
advertising photographer, I think, in
Mm-hmm.
California.
Yep.
But his photography prior to AI was kind of really creative and really kind of off the charts. And he did a lot of stuff with throwing paint on models or
Mm-hmm.
popping a balloon above a model's head and then getting the moment of just this really cool.
Right
They're not covered
before.
in water, but they're about to be covered in water, and that's the shot. And it is. It's eye catching, and it's like that's something you're going to stop on as somebody that's reviewing a magazine article or something on the internet. You're like, what is going on there? And it forces you to stop, which is what we've got to do, right? But now I think you can create all that stuff just in AI, and you don't even need to drench a model.
Mm-hmm. You don't even need a model. You just make them.
Well, that's true too. I don't
That's the
know.
other scary part.
I wonder if with like documentary stuff,
Yep.
I mean, you don't want to just manufacture everything from this point forward. So I think there's still going to be a want and a desire from people to have real stories about human living, not even human, but anything with cell structure that is going to be real. I mean, I don't know. It's going to be
Yep.
interesting. But like I said, I'm not scared of it. Well, I'm scared of learning it, but I'm not scared of replacing what we do 100%. But if we could figure out just how to enhance what we're doing, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not really. I don't know. I feel like I'll be able to keep up, and it's not like we're putting our head in the sand, so I'm not worried about it from that side. I'm absolutely terrified it from like a parental um, viewpoint, because there is some stuff that's happening. For example, there was a family that they had a YouTube channel, and these scammers used the videos to clone the daughter's voice. Then they used that voice to call, and then they spoofed the number so it looked like it was the daughter's phone number. They used that number to then call the mom to say like, "Hey, I need money. I'm in trouble. I'm hurt." And they scammed a bunch of money from them because it sounded like the daughter, came from the daughter's number. It was it's like the perfect scam, right? And so there's these little things that are happening, and then you can take the likeness, right, from a simple photo. You can do these crazy things, and so from like a dad standpoint, it is absolutely terrifying to me. Whereas we we have a safe word, so if there's something where someone calls me and they're like, "Oh my gosh, Brandon, I'm dying and I need $100,000," I'll just say, "What's the safe word?" And if they don't know the safe word, then game over, right? There's still a risk there, but I think at some point in time, we're all going to have to figure out what's real and what's not, and so that terrifies me from a like growing up with having an 8-year-old. What's he going to live with when he's 18? So that's pretty scary to me. But from a work standpoint, it's done nothing but benefit me. So I'm I'm happy to embrace it.
See, I didn't even think about that part of it, but that's very real.
Oh, it's terrifying. Like there's from like a likeness standpoint, right? You can just take a picture and modify someone into doing something that maybe is not on the up and up, and that can ruin someone's brand very early in their life. And um, I'm a big proponent of like, no one's going to tell your story. You got to tell your own story, right? And I think if our kids were taught very early on that your identity is your brand, and you can do things that are still fun, but much like a brand, if you tarnish that brand over time, that's how that's going to be seen. And you can rebrand and do all these different things, but that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. And I think if we um, kind of taught our kids more about, and they're learning that through themselves, they just don't think about it that way necessarily. But with social media, they very much understand personal branding, right? And if this photo pops up of someone doing something that isn't on the up and up, I mean, that can be debilitating for someone that's going through hormonal swings, and can just be devastating to a psyche. So it kind of scares me from those teenage years. They're so exposed, I guess is the word. I don't know, but
Developmental.
yeah, like they're going through some things. And I remember as a teenager, like the littlest thing would just like be, oh my gosh, they hate me. And it's only worse today with social media, right? Oh my gosh, they didn't like my photo or my reel, or they didn't. I don't even know what the new thing is now. It used to be Snapchat, but I'm sure it's some other video thing. But regardless, it just terrifies me as a dad. So, and I have a little boy. I don't even have a little girl.
Right.
So,
well, I see stuff on Instagram where it'll be some sports star that they've modified
yes,
to just talk trash about either a teammate or another team or a coach, and you're like, what is this person saying? But quickly I'm like, oh well, that's just manufactured.
mm-hmm.
But how many people, like you're talking about, that are young and influenced, that are like, did you hear what this person said about this
right.
person? And how is that even, I mean, that's not okay
Right.
to do that.
Right.
But I'm sure it generates tons of, I can't even watch Instagram anymore and be like, that's real. I mean,
right.
There's so much wildlife stuff that is just fake.
Yep.
And I can spot it immediately, but I'm sure there's people that won't spot it, and they think that there's an owl with its wings out covering up all the little babies sitting on this perfect little log and this perfect little, I see those
or flying
all the time,
with 8 of its little owlets
on its back or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that stuff looks real to a degree. I mean, I would say it's 75% there.
Yep. I know that's scary, but
well, I want to keep talking about it, and I plan on using it in all kinds of different ways. So I think we'll talk it more and more as we do stuff. Mm-hmm. And I really want to talk with some of these creative directors out there that how, they want to stand out. Their brand needs to stand out. How do we do it? But how do we do it responsibly? And how do we do it creatively so that it's still a human generated idea and humans are involved in the process, but then you're using AI to enhance it. But maybe that's pie in the sky. Maybe it's just all going to be AI, and that's the way it goes.
Well, I'll be surrogates living in our house through our Oculus or our Apple Vision. Have our surrogate selves out there in the meta world. There was a book about that. It was called Ready Player One. Did you ever read that?
Yep. I didn't read it. I watched it.
Okay, the movie sucks. But the book, it's pretty much a surrogate life, right? So everyone lives in the real world, but they have these things they put on their head, and there's these suits that give them haptic feedback, and then they go and they work in, I forget what it was called. But anyway, they live and work in this little area. They go to school there. If you're a kid, you go to work, your job's in there, and you don't have to do anything. So I don't know. It's pretty wild. Let's see. Yeah, I think you already asked for it, but just in case, if you do know someone that talks about this or that is doing that, let us know, and we're happy to reach out and see if we can get them on as a guest. So.
Yeah, I want to do that more and more.
Yeah, because that'd be awesome.
I think from now on out, like I would love to get that audio Nathaniel on as a guest and talk more about all of the specifics and that kind of stuff. So all those little nuances.
All those guys, they're just like they just want to do a good job. They want to just he was the same way, like just very like mum's the word. I don't need to say anything. Okay, this is what you need. Okay, you're set. See ya. So we'll get him.
Yeah, I think he would be great. I don't know if he'd do it, but I think he would.
Yeah. Cool.
All right, should we wrap it up?
I think so.